How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we've got the continuation of the recent round of interviews that Naoki Hamaguchi and Yoshinori Kitase have been going on. We've got a little bit more of that. So, yeah, I think we should just jump straight into it. We've got a bit of a long article from Games Radar, but a lot of it's stuff that we've kind of already covered. There's one point that I want to talk about, though, so we'll definitely get around to that. And then we've got more from Hobby Consolers, who are doing their thing of drip feeding these questions out. I think they've dropped about 4 articles today, something like that, 4, maybe 5. There's only a couple of them that are particularly interesting from the Hobby Consolers interview, although they are continuing over the course of the next few days. So I figure we'll get these out of the way and we'll keep an eye out for what comes. But the Games Radar interview has kind of sparked up a bit of a conversation, so we're going to touch on that towards the end as well. Don't forget, drop a like on the video, subscribe for future content, keep the party rolling. Want to hit 2,000 as quickly as possible. I was thinking by Christmas, but like we could do it this month. So, you know, if you're not subscribed, hit the sub button. Let's get on with this. So like I say, the first one that we're going to look at is the Hobby Consolers interview, the continuation of that. And like I say, there's been 3 or 4 articles that they've dropped. So they dropped one today that was talking about games not being transferable, and how some people are a bit unhappy that they can't transfer their save file from Remake over to Rebirth. And it makes sense that they've done it the way that they have. Otherwise, level scaling would have just got ludicrous. Would have been coming out of Part 2 potentially at level 100, and then what do you do for Part 3? So, yeah, it makes complete sense that they've just gone, no, clean slate. They have, again, reiterated that, you know, if you did play Remake and you've got a save file there, you'll get a summon materia that's accessible from the start of the game, which is nice. But, unfortunately, nothing else will carry over. Like I say, makes complete sense. The other article talks about the Gold Saucer scenario and the date again a little bit, and it does seem to confirm, like the previous interview, the everyeye.it interview, spoke heavily about the Cloud and Aerith date, which made me kind of think, is Cloud and Aerith going to be the story date, and then we can go on additional dates afterwards with other people? But in this interview, Hamaguchi talks about how the Gold Saucer, you know, it's going to be fun, it's going to be flashy, it's going to be over the top, it's going to be brilliant. And if you're looking forward to Cloud's dates, don't worry, they've been done very well. Dates, plural, doesn't necessarily suggest anything contrary to what I believed from the previous video, but it does kind of, you know, tilt it back the other way, that there are going to be multiple options for the storyline date scene. They're going to keep it the same as it was, I think. I think it was just the wording in the everyeye.it article, and the fact that it had gone from Japanese to Italian to English. I think that just potentially messed it up a little bit. Hamaguchi also goes on to say, though, that there are more variations and different things that weren't there before, that they've included more options for the date scenes, and that obviously it depends on who your date is, but you are going to see some really cool things. So yeah, it seems like it's going to be very much the same as the original mechanics for the date scene, so relationship mechanics, things like that. I don't know if they'll put it down to just a straight up choice, maybe. I'm pretty sure that they're going to have it as a mechanic, because again, in another one of the articles on Hobby Consolers, they talk about the synergy and how they're going to build on the character relationships, very similar to how they did in the everyeye.it interview. So yeah, all of this is kind of pushing towards everyone's going to be getting closer. We're going to be exploring the interpersonal relationships between the characters and things like that. So it makes sense that there are more options. It makes sense that these relationship mechanics feed into the Gold Saucer date. And who knows? Maybe we get even more characters that we can go on the date with. Maybe they add Red 13 in there. Who knows? But then we get to the interesting things. So the next article that they've released talks about Zack's role in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I know it's going to be more important than we imagined. And the interviewer starts off by asking, like, is it going to be necessary to have played Crisis Core Reunion? You know, do you need to have played that game to understand the story of Rebirth? And Hamaguchi reiterates, no, you don't have to have done that. It might be good to play Crisis Core afterwards to learn more about the characters. But the way that he appears in this game and the story behind him is not directly related to what happens to him in Crisis Core. So that could mean a lot of theories regarding Genesis and Angeal and things like that may have just gone completely out of the window, but you gotta remember, there's been a lot of things that have been said in interviews before Remake, after Remake, before Rebirth recently, and not all of them have been correct or accurate, or not all of them have been interpreted correctly, maybe. So I wouldn't rule anything out, and we'll come back to that in a little while. But then we come to the part of this interview that gets a bit interesting. So Hamaguchi says that Zack plays a very important role in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth by helping to tell the story in its entirety. In Remake, we had the echoes, whispers, that were used to show doubts about how the story was going to continue and play with people's expectations. What is going to happen? How is it going to end? At the end of the game, when they break through the barriers of destiny, suddenly anything was possible and people didn't know what was going to happen from that point on. The Whispers are very involved in all of this, and Zack takes on a very similar role in Rebirth. Through Zack, you will discover more about what happened after you broke through the restrictions of fate and escaped that timeline. You are going to discover what could really be happening and how it could all end. He plays a very important role in all of that. And then just to tack it on, there was one more article that they posted talking about the Whispers, and the interviewer asks about how the Whispers potentially could be like a representation of angry fans who wanted the game to stay the same and didn't want all the changes. And they answer that question as per usual, but towards the end of it, we get another little confirmation that the Whispers are back in Rebirth, although appearing in a slightly different form, which is a bit weird. I'm intrigued to know what that is and look into that a little bit further, but that they have a slightly different role compared to what they had in Remake. And together with Zack, they continue to help explain where the story is going and what the end of everything will be. So, there's a lot to look into as far as Zack goes there. Zack is going to be very similar to the Whispers in the way that he kind of focuses the story and kind of shines a light on the changes in the story. I feel like that's what they kind of mean here. So in the same way that in the first part in Remake, the Whispers were always there when there was a change going on. They drew the focus to the change, they tried to stop the change, and when they couldn't, they tried to do the best that they could. In the same way, I think Zack's going to be drawing focus to a lot of the things that have changed now in this new timeline, because we have the suggestion that, you know, we broke the restrictions of fate and escaped that timeline. So does that now mean that all of the multiverse theories that have been kicking about are correct? Or does it mean that the theory where by breaking that timeline and by escaping that path of destiny, we've created a new timeline and that's going to be where Rebirth takes place? Does that mean that Zack is going to exist in this other timeline and he's going to see the ramifications of what we did? But then why wouldn't we be in that timeline? Because if the goal was for us to break destiny and escape the fate that was laid out before the characters, surely they'd be in the timeline where they could witness the events unfold and like the changes that they wrought upon the timeline. It definitely suggests heavily that either there are multiple timelines or there were multiple timelines, or like a single timeline theory just doesn't cut it anymore, I don't think. Because like their terminology that they are using is talking about escaping a timeline. So if we've escaped one timeline, we're in a second timeline. Even if everything is in that second timeline, there was a previous timeline that we have broken and that we have escaped from. Again, it's potentially a terminology thing, and maybe the wrong words have been translated or the wrong words have been used potentially by Hamaguchi, but it's suggesting heavily that Zack is first off going to be massively involved in Rebirth, like heavily involved in this kind of subplot that's going to be going on. I don't know if he's going to become majorly intertwined with the main plot right away. I think he will eventually. I think there'll be a convergence point where that happens, probably Nibelheim. But at the very least, he's going to be the main focus of this sub-narrative that's going through, where we're going to see all of the changes to the world. He's going to shine a light on the things that are different, while the party probably continue on oblivious to some of the things that are happening. That would be my guess. Could it be a situation where it is all happening in one timeline, we've got Cloud and the party going about their business, and then Zack's kind of adjusting things behind them to try and maintain the flow of destiny? I don't know. But they're saying that he's going to serve a similar function, so I don't know if that means in a meta way by showing us the differences and making them stand out more to us, or if it means in a literal in-world, in-universe way, by trying to correct the flow of destiny. Because it suggests that the Whispers are also potentially going to be doing the same thing. They're not in the same form, they're not going to be doing the same thing as previously. And I mean, could this also be a suggestion that this manifestation of Zack is actually the Whispers manifesting as Zack from the livestream, you know, using his essence in the livestream to manifest there's a few different routes that I can go with this, and that all of you can go with this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the Zack thing though, because yeah, this is going to be a separate video. There is definitely going to be a separate Zack video, because we've got to move on to another couple of bits in a second. But yeah, the whole thing with Zack, it's definitely going to be integral to the story going forwards. And this next interview actually points out a few things about the story going forwards, potentially, so we'll move on to that and then we'll keep wrapping up. So that's the end of the Hobby Consolers stuff that we've got so far. Let's move on to this Games Radar interview, which I'm not going to go through all of it because we've gone through a lot of it in various other interviews. We get to talk about the synergy system, about the combat. There is one interesting point here where they talk about how going into the third game, Rebirth's sequel, whatever that will be, the interviewer says that not only will the cast expand further with the addition of Vincent and Sid Highwind, who appear in Rebirth as guest characters, much as Red 13 did in Remake, suggesting that we will not only get Vincent, but we will also get Sid. I'm looking forward to a Sid reveal in the very near future. Hopefully the next trailer we'll see some Sid. Please, give us some Sid. We need Sid. Please. But that's not the main thing that I want to talk about from this interview, even though that is an interesting point in itself. We've also got to talk about how we should view Rebirth as The Empire Strikes Back, you know, all this talk about the second part of a trilogy and what it should do and set up. We've gone into this on the channel before a few times, how this is kind of the most important part of the trilogy. Like, the first part sets it up, the third part finishes it, but the second part is kind of the one that does a lot of the heavy lifting, if you think about it, because it's got to take what happens in the first game, shape it, mold it, build it, improve it, and push it forwards into the third part of the trilogy. So it's not an easy position to be in, and they talk about that a little bit in this interview, and yeah, it's good stuff. I'll make sure that the link to this interview is in the description below. The Hobby Consolers ones, I'll put a link to one of them, and then you should be able to just hop around the Hobby Consolers website. That's probably going to be the easiest way, rather than me putting 5 links on top of the Games Radar one in the description. But this one will definitely be in there, because it's quite a long interview, this. And it does reiterate some things, but slightly differently. So it's very much worth looking into. But we get to talk about keeping the story of Final Fantasy VII intact in the Remake project. And the interviewer talks about how anyone who played Remake knows that the differences aren't so slight with Remake, and the fact that certain characters, Zack, have survived, certain characters are acting very, very differently to what they should be, such as Aerith and Sephiroth. You know, they've both been acting different. Aerith has known things that she really shouldn't know, and Sephiroth's doing crazy shit that he never did in the original. So there's a lot of things that are different there that should impact the story going forwards in kind of a branching manner. But Katase reiterates this thing that Nomura said recently about how we are finally going to link up with Advent Children. That is going to be part of the canon. The overall storyline, the development, will not go wildly out in a way that will not add up to Advent Children in the end. And he talks a little bit more, but then at the end he says, we're not trying to change the Final Fantasy VII story into something really different. The overall balance wouldn't really allow for that anyway. And it's this point again of how much of what they say is true and how much of it is just trying to subvert expectations and mislead people and point them in the wrong directions so that they don't really know what's going on. And it leaves me with a couple of things to say about this Advent Children comment. And I kind of touched on it a little bit previously when Nomura said it, but we'll go into it a little bit more here. So this links up to Advent Children bit. It could mean one of a few different things. The first of these things that it could mean is that the world state going into Advent Children is identical to how it was after the end of Final Fantasy VII OG. So by the end of this remake project, all 3 games, we will end up with Sephiroth defeated, Aerith dead in the live stream, Zack dead, and everyone else continuing, and then the Geostigma crisis goes on and everything pans out exactly as it should do. So we're still going to see Aerith die, we're still going to see Zack die, but in a different manner, and I feel like we'll see the same for Aerith as well if this is the way it ends up going. I don't think she'll die at the Forgotten Capital, it'll happen differently, but by the end of the whole project, everything will balance out so that it is exactly as it was at the end of the OG. That's possibility number 1. That's the one that I've seen a lot of people running with as well online, and it is possible. It is possible that they just want to insert this game in as an alternate for the OG. So you can play the OG and you'll still get to Advent Children and etc, Dirge of Cerberus. Or you can play the remake and you'll still get to Advent Children and then Dirge of Cerberus, and everything will make sense in a through line. That's the first possibility. Now the other possibility is that it'll still link up to Advent Children, and the events of Advent Children will still be able to play out the same, however there will be differences. So you have the possibility of maybe Zack or Aerith survives, or both, but things still pan out the same way. Aerith is still able to do the things that she needs to do in order to get rid of Geostigma. Cloud is still able to go and defeat Sephiroth, maybe with the assistance of Zack in person rather than appearing via the livestream. There are possibilities. Or they could be setting us up for a remake of Advent Children, potentially. They could be setting us up that it will lead into the story of Advent Children, but the world state will be different, and therefore Advent Children will be different. There's also the possibility that it links up to Advent Children because the events of Advent Children take place within the remake project. That's also a possibility. That's probably the least likely possibility, I think, but it's there, that some sort of event of Advent Children takes place in the remake project in part 3 probably, and that then leads us to the same outcome that will then feed into Dirge of Cerberus. I'm not too sure which, if any, of those suggestions it could be. It could be any one of numerous other possibilities as well, how they go about it. Let me know what you're thinking about that in the comments below, because there are a few different possibilities, like I say, but going off what they've said purely in this interview, purely going off that, the state of the world at the end of the remake project is not going to differ from the state of the world at the end of the OG. But the same people are going to be dead, the world's going to be in the same state, everything's going to be exactly the same. That's what this suggests, which flies in the face of everything that they've said so far about wanting to keep things different and fresh, because they're telling us that nothing's going to be different and it will link up to Advent Children. Therefore, every twist and turn that they put in isn't going to have any impact, because I know that it's meaningless, because everything's going to end up at the same point eventually. So yeah, we might have Zack wandering around doing his thing, but he's still going to end up dead, so it's not a problem. Yeah, Aerith might live a little bit longer and might do a few different things, but she's still going to end up dead, and in the live stream and in that position to save the planet. So, have they just diminished the whole project with this interview, and with this statement that Nomura made a few weeks ago talking about Advent Children, and how the remake project will link up to it? This is why I'm not 100% trusting of what they're saying right now, because surely they must know that by saying, oh yeah, we're changing things so that you've got like some tension and you can expect things to be different, and you know, it's not completely known to you, but at the same time everything's going to end exactly the same, so you don't need to worry about it. Do you know, that's what they're saying pretty much, and it's a little bit weird to me. So yeah, I'm going to stop this one here because, you know, it's a bit of a ramble, but yeah, again, the interview's very interesting in what they say and how they say it, and how they seemingly contradict each other, because they're putting changes in to make things different, but it's not going to finish different, so the changes don't matter, so don't worry about them. That's pretty much what they've said. Yeah, weird. Anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you're thinking about the interviews. Do you think things are going to stay the same? Do you think they're going to change? Do you think this interview or these interviews confirm the multiple timelines thing with the we have escaped one timeline? Because it seems to suggest that. Do you think it confirms that nothing's going to be different by the end of Remake? By the end of the whole project, is everything going to be the same? Let me know in the comments below what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Like the video, subscribe for future content, push us up to that 2,000. But more importantly than anything, have a great day.